Today we will talk about a new topic, which is this machine elements lab. This is part of your sessional work. So let us go there. You click in this link, this particular one, it will get opened. You see here what we have is the content of this machine elements lab. It is there, and detailing of the individual experiments, lab experiments. That links you will get gradually. Today we will be talking about the first two experiments. What are these experiments? We will see. Okay. So what are these experiments? Let us see. From this particular link, you will come to this one. Okay. This you see the contents of machine elements lab. Okay, now here are names of the experiments which I will be explaining here. This is the theoretical part only. The actual experiment you should carry out in the laboratory, but right now if it is not possible for you due to this pandemic situation, then what you will get is some video files of those experiments which our lab technicians they will carry out. Okay. So now you see, up to this NDT, non-destructive testing, these experiments we carry out for undergraduate students, and this remaining part they are carried out for PG students. Actually, for PG student there are some more experiments. The list is not extensive because this PG experiment part is not standardized. It depends on the particular teacher who will take up the sessional class. Okay, depending on his area of expertise, he will carry out some experiment, some advanced experiment. But we will be discussing about the experiments which we carry out in undergraduate level. Okay. So what are the experiments? Actually, we carry out 7 experiments there. So those 7 experiments are this determination of area moment of inertia by torsional pendulum method and study of dynamic balancing machine. These 2 experiments I will be discussing today. Okay, the remaining part, the remaining 5, they will be taken up gradually. Okay, there are 2 experiments on bearing, a hydrostatic bearing and a hydrodynamic bearing. The theory of bearings are known to you. They have been discussed in fluid mechanics as well as in mechanical engineering design. Then there are some experiment on machine dynamics, the critical speed of a shaft, okay, the experimental determination. Theoretical part is covered in your theoretical subject, dynamics of machines. Similarly, natural frequency of a cantilever beam, its experimental determination we will carry out here. And the last one is non-destructive testing, just to witness how to carry out non-destructive testing. Okay, now these two slides, PowerPoint slides for determination of area moment of inertia and for the experiment on dynamic balancing of a rotor. These slides I have already downloaded here, so I will explain from there. Okay, that is clear. The first one I will start. This is determination of area moment of inertia by torsional pendulum Okay. Now the question is, what is torsional pendulum? So this topic has been covered in your higher secondary level, but still by the term pendulum what we feel normally is a simple pendulum. Okay. But torsional pendulum is somewhat different than simple pendulum. Okay. So actually simple pendulum is used to demonstrate a simple harmonic motion. Okay. So that way a simple pendulum is like this. Some mass is hanged from a fixed support by a very thin wire. Okay. And then this mass oscillates in a vertical plane. Okay. So this movement of this mass like a bob, it is called the bob. It is considered as a point mass, and this point mass, it oscillates like this. Okay. In a vertical plane it will oscillate. Okay. But for torsional pendulum, this oscillation takes place in a horizontal plane. Here also the object is hang by a thin wire from a fixed support like this. Understand? This is simple pendulum. This is torsional pendulum. Here oscillation takes place due to gravity force. Now here oscillation takes place due to the restoring force of this particular wire or rod, okay, which has a certain torsional stiffness. K suffix T means a torsional stiffness. Right? And by this rotation, there is some restoring torque, there is some shear force which will generate in this wire or rod, and that will make it oscillate in a horizontal. So this is torsional pendulum. Now take a note that this torsional pendulum is not necessarily something, a disc, where oscillation will take place in this way. We can hang any object of any shape in this fashion. Okay. For example, this particular disc, we can make it vertical and then we can hang it, and then also we can give a twist to it. Okay. Or let us do one thing, say the diameter of the disc, let us consider this quite small, okay, like a smaller diameter, say this is a smaller diameter. And here we say thickness of disc, but if we go on increasing this thickness, it is becoming the length, and the object disc is now called a cylinder. You understand? Both are circular in cross section, but axial length of disc is much smaller compared to its diameter. Yes. Whereas for cylinder, this axial length is much larger compared to the diameter. So this way also we can produce this torsional pendulum. See, there can be other objects which we can use for this. So what is the objective? To find out area moment of inertia of irregular section by comparison with that of a standard specimen. So what is simple pendulum and what is torsional pendulum we have explained. Okay, something is written here also. And then what will happen for torsional pendulum? If we give it certain amount of twist, say this has gone up to angle theta. So in the absence of any damping, what will happen? This will oscillate with an amplitude of plus minus theta. Okay. So this is written here. Torsional A rigid body suspended by a light wire, and when it is twisted by some small maximum angle theta, T stands for theta, and released from rest, the body oscillates between plus minus theta. The restoring torque is supplied by the shearing of the string or wire, this thing, due to its torsional stiffness. Now, for our experiment, what we will do, we will take a known specimen. So, that specimen has a rectangular cross section, and for a rectangle, we can easily find out what is the area moment of inertia. Okay. So, now in the slide, some idea about the area moment of inertia is given here. So, first moment is your centroid, and then about the centroid usually we calculate the second moment, which is our area moment of inertia, and then there are some other equations. If we carry out our analysis with respect to another coordinate system, then there are some relations. These are the relations, how for shifting the object. These are known to you in higher secondary course or in your first year mechanics. You did properties of area. And one important observation you must have noted there also, that there are some conservation also, right, for any area. Okay. There are two particular values of moment of inertia. This quantity would be maximum for particular orientation of the coordinate axis. Right. So, this area moment of inertia is a function of the orientation of this axis. If we rotate this thing, okay, we will get a different value. Right. And then there are certain directions for which this moment of area will be maximum or minimum. Okay. So, that part I am not going to discuss there. For a general orientation of the coordinate axis, x, y is rotated at x prime, y prime, then it is calculated, okay, what is there, and then a derivative of that moment of inertia with respect to this angle is carried out, and then you can find out what is the direction of your principal moment of inertia. Right. But what we know is that these are irregular shapes, but our shapes are not that way irregular. We will be carrying out our experiment for this type of shapes. Okay. So, here we know what are the principal directions. Okay. Actually, the axis of symmetry, if it exists in the particular shape, then those axes of symmetry are the principal axis there, about which we will get the maximum and minimum moment of inertia. Now, here you see for circular shape, every direction which passes through center, that is the principal direction. Here this is symmetric about center. Here for rectangle, we know there are two axes of symmetry, okay, along length, along the width or breadth. So, those two are the two directions. For a trapezoidal shape, at least one axis of symmetry we can identify. Okay. The other one will be somewhere which we need to find out. Okay. This is the other one, and for isection also this is symmetric about this. This is called the wave, and this is the flange of the isection. Okay. So, through the center of the wave parallel to this flange we have an axis, and through the center line of this wave we have another axis. So that way in our experiment we are going to find out area moment of inertia for these sections only, not any general section or an irregular section like that, where at least the principal directions for principal moment of area are known to us. Okay, this is what we'll do, and for that we have a standard test specimen whose moment of inertia is already known. Means from theoretical calculation you can find out what is the area moment of inertia. For rectangular cross section, what it is? 112 BH cube, right? Okay. So now let us go into the theory part. How we are using this known moment of inertia of the standard specimen to determine the area moment of inertia of these unknown for the unknown sets. Okay. What is the technique we are using? We are observing for the standard specimen, we can hang it like this. Okay. It will hang like this, not in a horizontal position. In horizontal way it will not oscillate, we will hang that standard specimen in vertical, okay, about the principal axis. And then we will give a small twist to it, and we will observe what is the time period of oscillation. You know, usually a number of oscillations are allowed, 10, 20 something, and then the total time is divided by this number, we get time period of oscillation. This we do for the unknown specimens as well, which we need to find out. And then we use this relation. This is the relation where this time period of oscillation of the unknown and the time period of oscillation of the standard, S for standard, U for unknown. These are known. Okay. Now, this is mass moment of inertia, and this is also mass moment of inertia. But you know, if the material of the standard specimen and the unknown specimens are same, as well as their thickness are same, okay, then mass moment of inertia and area moment of inertia, they would be what it is called, they have a particular relations. They are proportional, right? So they are proportional. That means the mass moment of inertia and area moment of inertia, okay, they are proportional. And what is written here for standard specimen, this is not mass moment of inertia, right? Actually, it should have been written as AMOI, area moment of inertia. Because in general, by the term moment of inertia, what we get a feeling of mass moment of inertia. But what we are determining here is area moment of inertia. Okay, that much is clear. But it is not that if the thickness or the material of the unknown specimen and the standard specimen are different, then we cannot carry out this technique. We cannot use the technique. Because again you see this mass moment of inertia for the unknown and for the standard, they are again proportional to their density and thickness. This H represent thickness, rho represent the density. This is clear. So this is the technique. Now the thing is, where from we are getting this particular equation. Okay? These equations, these are coming from this expression for time period of oscillation. So let us see whether this is correct or not. Now, this oscillatory motion, okay, of a torsional pendulum, okay, actually this is equivalent to the translational movement of a spring mass system, okay, or a spring block system. They are identical. So this is an angular motion, and for spring block system we have a translational motion. System equations are identical. Now, for translational motion, if a mass m is accelerating with an acceleration say f, so m into f becomes the dynamic force. Right? In angular motion, that force becomes the moment, and that moment is generated by the angular acceleration. Okay. So here we have given it angular displacement of theta. So when it will oscillate, this theta double dot value will be maximum at the two ends, then here again this is 0, this thing will happen.
Yes,
right? But, you know. So this mass for angular movement will be substituted by its mass moment of inertia. So this is the equation we are getting for dynamic equilibrium. Now, say if we consider the situation when it is not oscillating first, we have given this twist of angle theta. So I have applied a moment there. That same moment, this moment, when it is in static condition, this moment is coming from the restoring force of this torsional stiffness of this wear, thin wear, right? So that is given by this equation. This equation is known to you as well. Force is some stiffness into displacement. So here this moment is some stiffness into angular displacement.
So this moment is torsional moment.
This is torsional moment,
Yes.
of course. Okay. So bending moment and torsional moment both are same dimension.
Yes, sir.
Huh?
And this is the
So, so instead of T we have written this as M, and also this is M. So this is known to you, right?
yes, sir.
Okay. So what we say, this is as if this is equivalent to our torsional stiffness. Sure. Now what happens? Why? This is negative. This is the restoring force. Okay. This stiffness is the restoring force. And now you see we have two equations, one coming from dynamic equilibrium, one coming from static equilibrium. Now if we equate this moment, so this is equal to minus of this quantity, right? And then this we are taking in the left hand side. So this is the third equation we are getting from equation 1 and 2. What is the solution of this equation? Is it not equivalent to mx double dot plus k into x equal to 0, which we get for a spring lock system?
Yes.
Right. So again, that x is now our angular displacement theta. So the general expression for this theta is some theta 0 and sine omega. This n means this is a natural frequency, and this is time t. This is known as phase angle. So you can check, you substitute this expression of theta in equation 3. So straight away this will go here. So straight away it will become kt theta 0 and then sine omega n t plus phi. Here what we are doing, we are taking second derivative with respect to time. So here after taking first derivative, we will get omega n as a constant. We will get omega n theta 0, the sine will become cos. Another derivative will give us omega n square theta 0, that cos will become again sine, and this will there, and a negative sign will come. So here we are getting a negative omega n square, right? So this now, and the remaining part, this sine omega n t plus phi and this theta 0, it is common, so that we are eliminating, right? So this is minus. If we take it in the right hand side, or say if we express it as omega n square is this kt by I, actually this is I suffix m, mass moment of inertia. S is written here. So anyway, this is mass moment of inertia. This is clear?
Yes, sir.
What is written here is basically square root of that quantity, right? And you know this natural frequency, or this, you can say this is angular velocity, okay, of the oscillation. This is in radian per second, and from here we can find out the time period of oscillation, which means how much time is required to carry out one oscillation. Now in one oscillation, the angle which we need to go through is 2 pi, 360 degree or 2 pi. So if the angular velocity is omega n, how much time will be required, okay, to translate this 2 pi, generate 2 pi. Obviously t into omega n, so this time period of oscillation is 2 pi by omega n. So this is the equation. What is omega n? This is the expression. Here if we substitute, what it will become, 2 pi root over, now it will be I suffix m, say mass moment of inertia, by kt. And what is that kt? This kt is Gj by L. Now, I think this is clear to you what it indicates. This G, J and L, they correspond to, L is the length of this wire, okay. J is the polar moment of inertia of this wire rod, and G is the shear modulus, okay. So this is what we are substituting for kt, and this is the expression we are getting, okay. So this is written here. Now if we write it for the unknown specimen, for the standard specimen, we get this equation, and from there we find out what is the area moment of inertia of the unknown specimen.
So in case of unknown specimen, the length of the wire will be same.
That will remain same because here we have a clamp. Actually, in our experimentation, here we have a clamp by which this is hanged. So that part you will get in some videos. There will be some video which you will get from our laboratory in charge. They have already carried out those experiments. Okay. So actual experimentation part will be shown through video. It would have been better if, but anyway, you cannot see it simultaneously. So, okay, this much is clear, right?
Yes, yes.
And what is significance of this particular equation? Or say, if we put it in this fashion, this is time period of oscillation is something root over I by k, right? Then for larger value of k, okay, for larger value this omega will increase, and if this omega increases, then obviously this t will reduce. Higher frequency means lower time period of oscillation. Okay. So this is same for our translatory motion for spin lock system. It is the same thing. So that is known to us. Okay, these are the unknown shapes for which we will carry out the experiment. Now in experimental setup, there is a particular setup. Okay, there is a particular setup where we use a particular string. Actually, these strings are the strings which we use in a musical instrument. They are strings of guitar that you can purchase, and you know their diameter. They are very thin wax. Okay, one end of those strings contain a end, and that is quite convenient to fix it at that particular end. And in the other end, we use a clamp, and the specimen is hanged from that end. Okay. So in addition, a stopwatch is available nowadays. Mobile phones are there, so stopwatch is a thing common. And why balance is needed? A common balance. You understand what is common balance? When we have to calculate this density, okay, in that case we need the balance, because we have to carry out calculation of volume for the specimen. We need to find out the volume, and then from the weight we are getting using common balance, we can determine density. So ideally this should be done whether the unknown specimen and the standard specimen has same material density or not, that we should check. The material of the standard specimen is perspex. Okay. So that perspex has different various grades. So that way there might be some variation in density. A particular specimen is there which is made of aluminium. Okay. So some material difference is also there. Somewhere the thickness variation is there. So that way you have to use this one for a particular specimen, and for other ones this density variation and thickness variation, that effect you need to consider. Okay. So what is shown here is part of the table. The observation we will note here in this particular table. This is table of observation. The procedure I have already mentioned. It is written here. So here, what is the section? Standard is rectangular. We have another rectangular unknown section, then circular. This is what you have to write. The dimension of these sections you have to note using this vernier scale, okay, and the other scales are also there. Okay. So this diameter, the thickness, here the width and the length. Here again some more dimensions are needed. Okay. So these dimensions you will note. The density, this is also required. We need to find out the density. And we observe for certain number of oscillations. Here it is written for 20 oscillations. You note the time, and then we will take average of this. Again, this thing you should carry out for 2 or 3 times, whether there is uniformity in this observation, to check that. Okay. So this thing we will do, observing time period. Now what? This is result. The experimental moment of inertia is coming from this equation, and where from we are getting theoretical. There are certain equations to find out area moment of inertia. This is given here. How to find it out? You know this thing. I am not going to highlight that. And then you have to observe what is the effectivity of the experiment. How close is the experimental observation with the theoretical observation? This much is the experiment here. With this, there are some other problems as well. Here, the particular problem is find out the torsional stiffness. Okay, it is written here as the torsion constant. That means that Kt reduced. So that is measured from this experiment also. We can find out what is Kt through that experiment as well. Right. There are some more type of problems which you can solve. This will give you some idea about this technique. However, this is not a very difficult one. Right. So this was our first experiment. Let us go into the second one. What is this one? This one is to study the dynamic balancing machine. Now observe, this is study of dynamic balancing machine only. Let us go into that slide, dynamic balancing. Okay. So you know what is balancing? You did it again in your theory of machines subject.
Static balancing.
There are 2 types, right?
Kirchhoff dynamic, force and moment will be balanced.
Okay. So let us discuss that in very briefly. Usually in a rotor, there are some unbalance which comes from the uneven distribution of mass about a rotor's rotating central line. That means this rotor, which is supported by 2 bearings at the 2 ends, when this is supported, this rotor has a particular axis of rotation. This is clear?
Yes.
After fixing it, this axis of rotation is fixed. And say for each elemental strip, if we calculate what is the CG, center of gravity of this particular section and we make a plot of that, okay, that distribution might be something like this. So it is exaggerated, of course, but what we can say is that this center of rotation and the center of gravity, they are not identical in general. There will be some difference somewhere, some unevenness is there, uneven distribution of mass about rotor's rotating center line. This is there. So this is the cause of unbalance. And we carry out balancing. There are certain techniques to carry out balancing. What it does? Eliminates the unwanted inertia force. Actually, when it will rotate, okay, this distance between the rotational central line and the say centroidal central line or position of the center of gravity. This distance multiplied by square of its rotational velocity, omega square. So that means this eccentricity into omega square and the mass there. This will give you an inertia force. Okay. So this is unbalanced force. Okay. This centrifugal force, this is our that epsilon into omega square.
Yes.
Right? This epsilon is basically known as eccentricity, the distance between rotational axis and centrifugal axis. Okay. So this is balanced. Now, how this is balanced, that we will see. So that depends, the technique of balancing depends on the shape of this rotor also. The length of the rotor is quite large. In that case, we know that this unbalance is coming not a single source. There are a number of points from which this unbalanced force is coming. But say a particular rotor where this is a shaft and then we have a disc mounted on that shaft at some point. In that case, the unbalance is coming from the disc itself. We can neglect the unbalance coming from that shaft. Why it is so? This centrifugal force is eccentricity into that omega square, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, usually for shaft, the outer radius is much less compared to the outer radius of a disc. If we mount something, say a pump, okay, the impeller of a particular air handling equipment, those diameters are many times large compared to the diameter of the shaft.
Yes.
So that is major contributor. Okay. So that way, if there is a single disc, then we know that entire unbalance coming from that single disc. Then there are certain situations where we have multiple discs or the shape of the disc is like that. It is, we can take it as a single disc or a distributed sort of mass. Okay, so that way the techniques are basically of two types. So one is static balancing. You see the representation, these are the bearings, and the rotor can be modeled as a single disc. Okay, here. Or in dynamic balancing, the rotor cannot be modeled like this. This is distributed mass. We have to model it with several such discs. Okay. In such case, we carry out dynamic balancing. Now, what is the difference between static balancing and dynamic balancing? So, this static balancing is only balancing of the centrifugal forces. So, if these forces are balanced, then we know that at this bearing location, they will not produce any unbalanced coupling. But what happens if we have several disks and even individual disks are balanced? In totality, this force balance, if we carry out, then also the direction of forces, they will have different angular orientations, and due to that, the different angular orientations of the resultant forces, which are distributed along the axis, that will produce some unbalanced couple or unbalanced moment at the bearing locations. So, that is known as couple unbalance. So, when there is only force unbalance, we say this is a case of static balancing, and we do not need to carry out dynamic balancing there.
Yes.
It is quite easy. You rotate this particular disc. We know that the heavier mass, the heavier portion will come down at the bottom.
Yes.
You do it repeatedly and then you mark the bottom position, and afterwards put some weight at the other end, and that way you can rectify the unbalance there roughly. But in case of couple unbalance, if it is there, actually from the shape of the rotor we know whether we need to carry out static balancing or dynamic balancing. Then it is a case of force balance and couple unbalance as well. This is known. How to carry out these things, there are some mathematics involved, some equations. You did it in your theory of machines. We want to discuss that, right? And this is also known. If the condition of dynamic balancing are satisfied, the condition of static balancing are, it is by default they will get satisfied. Objective of balancing, that the center of gravity of the system remains stationary during a complete revolution, and the couples involved in acceleration of the different moving parts balance each other. What does it mean? Center of gravity remains stationary means there might be some difference between the rotational axis and centroidal axis. That eccentricity is producing some unbalanced force. It will always be there. Okay. But that magnitude, we will talk about that magnitude and other things. Okay. They are not producing unbalanced couple here. In that sort, there might be some unbalanced centrifugal force is there, but it is not generating any unbalanced couple as such. Okay, let us go further. Let us see how it is done. So, this is static balancing. Okay, if we have a mass here diagonally opposite at that location, or you know that m2 into r2, if this is equal to m1 into r1, then also the condition satisfied. If there are number of masses like this, a different angular orientation, then what we do? This centrifugal force for each of the mass, for any omega, they are known. Omega r1 square into m1, their direction is known, and we make a vector diagram. We start from a particular force, So let us plot this FC1 first, this one. Then from the end point, we draw the force vector for this second mass. Right? For the third mass, from here we draw that. Then whatever number of masses are there, we go on constructing that. And then we close it. And corresponding to this closing vector, we put a correction mass.
Yes.
Okay. So this will balance. So balancing of several masses rotating in the same plane is clear. Now let us consider a particular situation where we have a single mass, okay, and we are trying to balance it by two separate masses. Okay. So this is not identical with this one. So here the balance masses are in different plane. So in that case, what we need to do? Here we need to balance the forces, like the vector diagram for the forces that should match,
Yes.
and in addition from any point, okay, the moment of these forces that should also match. Okay. So there is a force vector diagram, there is a couple vector diagram, those two diagrams are there. So this way of balancing, this is as if we are going towards dynamic balancing. So this is the technique of dynamic balancing. Okay. So you have enough idea about these techniques, right? You have carried out so many problems. I think it's dynamic balancing is quite an important chapter in your theoretical subject, right? So now let us go into the experimental technique. So in experiment, we have to balance the rotor. That is the thing. So what we do is we use a machine. Okay. Put a rotor there. This is the rotor. You see, from this point, from the end point of the coupling to the other end point. Okay, this is the rotor. The rotor consists of the shaft. There are some discs. This one, 3 discs are shown. Can be some more number of discs as well. So can you identify here? This is a particular bearing. Okay, this one is bearing stand. This one is the other bearing stand. This is the machine. This end is the drive part. There are some controllers there. This is the indicator part on top of this drive part. These are some indicators where we get reading. Now, actually this is known as the machine bed on which these bearing supports can travel in axial direction. Why this arrangement is there? Because the length of the rotor, it might change.
Yes.
Okay. If we have a longer or shorter, we have to move these supports. So that provision is there, and other provision which we require is to accommodate. Can you identify? There is a shaft. Okay.
Yes, sir.
There is a shaft. So for different rotors, the diameter of the shaft that can change.
Yes.
So if these are fixed type of bearing, if the bearings here, they are a totally enclosed type of bearing, we cannot accommodate that. Okay. So here what we have is 2 separate rollers. This is a roller here, this is another roller here. Okay, and in between these 2 rollers, this shaft is placed. So any diameter can be accommodated using these two rods. And from top there is a support. After we place the shaft here, we make a fixing arrangement is there, so that it cannot come out. So it is the same thing on the other end also. The rotor supporting arrangement is identical. Okay. So this is the thing. The next part is how to connect the rotor with the drive motor. This drive motor is part of the machine. This is the drive unit, and this end, okay, this is the end of the drive motor. Now, to observe one thing, the center line of this drive motor, this is at a fixed height, okay, from the ground. This height we cannot change. Okay. Now, what will happen if this diameter is increased? The center line of the rotor, that will also increase. The height of this center line from the base, that will increase. So, maintaining the same height of this drive unit and our rotor unit, this is a problem. So, what is done here, although ordinary sort of coupling is shown here, but the coupling between the rotor and the drive motor, okay, this is done through a double hooks joint.
Double
Hooks joint, not a single hooks joint. Do you know what is hooks joint?
No.
It can accommodate any angular misalignment. There are some fork, two fork ends are placed, and in between there is an element which connects both the fork ends. Anyway, you go back into your couplings. It is known as hooks joint, and there is a double hooks joint which can accommodate the angular misalignment which will come from the center point of this drive motor and of this rotor. If we have two such hooks joint at both ends, that can be accommodated. Okay, this is clear. This is one part, how to mount the rotor. So, what we are describing now is features of dynamic balancing machine. This is what we have already discussed, two chief methods. This is also we have discussed. Oh, what else is there? I will come back to it. Now, the thing is here, this is the control unit. Control panel means this one, the control panel, and this is the drive unit. You see what is there. In the drive unit there is a on-off switch, there is a handbrake, whatever, while stopping this rotor, you can put this handbrake. There is another selector which is a speed selector. There is a high speed operation and a low speed operation here. Okay, and this control panel, is there any detailing here? This is detail of this control panel. Okay. What is there? There are unbalanced indicator and there is an angle indicator. Okay. Why it is 1 and 2? This 1 and 2 refers to these two correction planes. Now, what we have seen earlier, this sort of dynamic balancing always requires two correction planes, because unbalanced couple cannot be corrected by a single plane.
Yes,
It requires two planes. So, even we have many number of discs say they are separated axial direction. We require only two correction planes, okay, to balance the uneven couple. So these two are selected, okay. This is fine. And then we also need to know some dimensions from this particular setup for the particular rotor which we are now going to balance. What we measure there, the distance between the two bearing stand, okay. A plus B plus C. C is the distance between these two correction planes.
Yes.
And what is A and what is B, you understand. Distance of correction plane 1 from left bearing and the distance from right bearing. Okay. So this A, B, C, their axial distance, and this R1 and R2, they are the radius of this correction planes. That means the distance, the radius at which we will place our correction mass. There are two modes of operation. One is this, whether we will balance by adding mass. There is another way of balancing. This is by removing some mass. Then this is the measurement selector. Okay. When the selector corresponds to plane 1, we get reading here. And when you shift it to plane 2, we get reading here. Okay, and this is the selector here. Slow speed, high speed operator is there. And what else is there? This is configuration selector. What is configuration selector? See, this is a particular configuration. Okay. Here, these two could have been the correction planes, and this would have been the third disc, which you have not considered for placing the correction mass. Okay. Sometimes these two are there, the third one could have been placed here. Okay. So the configuration might be of different types. So accordingly, we select this particular choice here. Okay. So this is configuration selector switch, and according to the configuration, the dimension A, B and C, those will come. Okay. That is indicated in the manual of the machine itself. For different configuration, how to measure these distances. Now, there are 5 dimensions A, B, C, R1 and R2, which is required to draw the vector diagrams. To draw such vector diagrams, the machine cannot do it without constructing the vector diagram. It has to do it.
Yes.
Now, there are other sensors to find out these dimensions. This you have to give manually. Okay. You have to set this distance. How they are given there? Actually, these are some resistance, variable resistance. They are known as resistance spot. Okay. Where you will get some scale 0 to 10, 0 to 10 and that way. So these are the inputs. There is a scale, something like that. Okay. On that you have to set your value at a certain value corresponding to the configuration. You have to set it. So these are the inputs to the machine. Okay. It knows what are the values and with this known value it can draw the vector diagram, and what it senses is the unbalanced force. Okay. So, that unbalanced force as well as the direction of that unbalanced force, it can sense through some vibration sensor. Okay. Now, where the vibration would be maximum? We cannot measure it in the rotating element itself. So, on the shaft or on the disc, we cannot put any sensor.
Yes.
Sensor has to be fixed on a fixed part. So, where it will affect most? On this bearing stand. Okay. So, these two bearing stand, they contain these sensors. You see, this is a stand, this black one. Here, you will find that from here some output is coming out from there. You have a vibration sensor which are attached through this part. Okay, some vibration sensing element is there in between. Is there. So that is considered, this vibration amplitude is considered proportional to the dynamic force. Clear? And thereby this unbalance has some relation with that vibration amplitude, and the direction of that, this comes from vector diagram also. Like here, it is not that this closing vector will give us the magnitude, it will give magnitude as well as the direction. So, what we are getting here is some magnitude and the orientation. So, this is unbalanced mass, means this is the correction we have to make in this particular direction, and this mass has to be placed at this particular radius. Clear?
Either it is add or remove.
Either it is add or remove. If you select remove, then you have to drill a hole. You are not going to select that. In some cases, it is not possible to add mass. Say for an impeller, you cannot add something, it will affect the air flow or water flow, whatever. Then you need some provision to drill some holes, okay, say such that the air flow or the fluid flow is not affected. That way, in some cases, okay, or say in some other type of rotating machinery, that is relevant. But in our experimental setup, in this particular setup, we cannot drill a hole there. This is a standard setup, okay, that will get damaged as such. So we add some mass there. It is always add in our case. Okay, this is clear. So it measures vibration here, and what I was talking about is the direction, right? So this is the correction mass, indication of the correction mass, which is to be placed at a particular angle at this radius, at outer radius, we will place that. So these correction mass are basically plasticine, okay, which is a sticky material. So we measure that much of plasticine, use a balance to measure that much, and at that angular direction we place it at the outer radius, put it there. So this is fine. Now the question is, how to identify this direction. Okay, this power has come. How to identify this angle? From here, if we take another view from here, how to measure the angle? We need a zero reference, right?
Yes.
Without that zero reference, how can we measure the angle? So that is why. So whenever this rotor is fixed with this drive motor unit,
Yes, sir.
then first we have to give a trial run. Okay. So this is first trial run, then we give a known mass at some point and we take another reading. Okay. And then again in the other plane some known mass is given. So this is what we need to do. I will talk about that afterwards. But for the machine itself, after that particular trial run, it sets a zero. It gets a reading from which it sets a zero. Okay. So what is that zero position now? How the user will know the zero position? So to get that, to find out that, in the drive unit, in this particular position, here you see this is a fixed frame of the machine from which the drive motor shaft is coming out. So this portion is a protector. There is a protector fixed in the frame. This is 0 to 360 degree. Okay. See this one. Here we have marking 0 to 360. Understand this circle?
Yes, sir.
Is fixed on the body of this drive unit. Okay. And on this protector, we have a marking. This is an arrow.
Yes, sir.
So this arrow is the zero position. So when it will give reading of certain angle, okay, what we do is now from initial trial run we had a position there, okay, say we had attached a certain mass there for the trial run that we can use to define the zero itself, okay, or no, here this is not necessary. Simply if we rotate it to this direction, now that part you have to see during in this video how they are putting, okay, making that setting for the angle. I am not very sure about that setting, but a mechanism is there, okay, by which this can be done. That angle can be set. Okay, and this is the thing we have in our machine. So now the thing is, the unbalance is not corrected in a single run. We need to carry out the experiment for some number of times. Okay. So the observation which we will get is somewhat like this. There is mass added. The correction plane, there is 1 and 2, say left and right. The amount meter reading, angle meter reading, these are the readings we are getting from here.
Yes, sir.
We are placing those correction masses. But it is not that this will give us perfect balancing in a single run.
Yes.
So this amount meter reading, it will go on reducing. So at least 2-3 runs are required. This is clear. Now note one thing, whenever this is 0, what that 0 indicates? This 0 indicates that it is less than say 0.5, whatever it can measure. From there also some remaining unbalance is there, which it cannot measure, it is there. Okay, in the machine it is there, it is not measurable as such. So that accuracy part we'll see afterwards. So there is another one which is slow and fast. I think in fast operation you can run it 1 second. Final run you can make it in fast operation. Then you need to check whether you are getting some amount reading there or not. So at least you cannot get a reading less than 0.5, it doesn't make any sense.
Yes.
The minimum resolution, whatever. Okay, this is operation principle. You can go on through it. Whatever I have explained, it is like that it is written here. These steps I have already explained. Now this is specification of the particular machine which are available to us, this machine which are available to us. You see some of the specification. This is the weight of the rotor, it is in job. This is an industrial machine, so they are referring the rotor as the job. Okay. Maximum diameter, what is the restriction? This is the restriction.
Yes.
There might be some other restriction, okay, from which they have given the specification. Maximum distance measured from coupling and to extreme bearing center. Something minimum distance between bearing. Minimum distance you understand? The minimum distance between these two stand. Minimum distance. Whatever, something more is there. Drive motor is 3 horsepower, balancing speed 500. There is another speed also. Usual speed. Whatever. Okay, what is minimum unbalance measured? 15 gram millimeter, right? Okay. What is your question? Gram millimeter.
Mass into distance.
Mass into distance. Right? So if your correction mass is fixed at the outer end, say this value is say 200 millimeter.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then your 15 is that 200 into say unknown, put x
Yes, sir.
gram. So it is 15 by 200.
0.075.
That much is there. So maximum achievable unbalance for maximum. This is in microns. What this micron is? Maximum achievable unbalance. So that means this refers to the eccentricity actually, corresponding to this speed, corresponding to might be the maximum weight. So this is
Micrometers.
this micron 0.001 millimeter or 10 to the power minus 6 meter. So this is the eccentricity it is referring to. Okay, a particular setting is shown here. We have only some 2-3 type of rotors. Okay, this is for a particular rotor setting. These are the dimensions.
Distance between the correction mass and the bearing will be not same in both sides.
Both side means
In left bearing and right bearing side. This distance A and B is not same.
might not be same. What is written here?
Not same.
This might not be same. Okay. Now, to accommodate that, okay, you have to see how much space is available. There is some space required. There is some space required. This is what you are setting manually as per your convenience. So it is not a very fixed one. You have your freedom to place it somewhat towards right, towards this, whatever. And after the setup is complete, then you will measure what are this distance is. So this is a particular reading that we are getting. This is the reading we will get. Now this much is okay. This is our observation. But the question remains is that how the machine measures the unbalance. What we observed is that it measures by using these vibration sensors. And the remaining part is a black box, is it not? If you don't have this machine, can you balance? Say, this is a commercial machine or industrial machine. A rotor is getting balanced. Okay. And then where it will go? In actual operation, you have fixed the rotor in a plant. And after some period of time, it generates vibration. It is possible. Erosion, other things, so many things are there. Can you balance it now? Or you have to take it back to that particular industry who did it? That is not viable option, right? So, this is what, if we do it in the site, this is called the field balancing. Actually, this field balancing is one step ahead of a dynamic balancing machine. So what this machine is doing, it is implementing the same procedure that an engineer will do to carry out the field balancing. The whole thing is integrated in the machine itself. So, which book you have followed? Mollick and there is a standard textbook of machine dynamics written by Ashok Mollick and Amitabh Ghosh. Ghosh and Mollick's textbook on dynamics of machines. Have you gone through it? Anyway, there are some standard textbooks. Sigle's textbook is there. S.S. Ratan is there. Whatever be the textbook. In dynamic balancing chapter, towards the end, we'll get a section on field balancing. Actually, this is not covered in the course, but it is there. So you have to follow that portion now. Okay. So in field balancing, now you understand what is field balancing, right? Now this is the actual motor. Here we have a rotor inside. It is not visible from here, but whatever. This is a duct. Inside that duct there is a rotor. Okay. So this is one of the bearing. On the other side there is a bearing. There is a coupling. Okay. In such case, this has developed some vibration. So one need to carry out balancing for this rotor. Say this is the schematic diagram corresponding to this. This is the rotor, say, some bearing is there, and some measurement is done. Where measurement is done? Measurement plane A and B, actually they are the bearings, bearing location. Here also, this is the vibration sensor.
Yes, sir.
This is indicator, vibration indicator. See, this is plane A, plane B, vibration sensors. This is vibration indicator, rotational speed indicator, these things are there. What else is there? Some photoelectric probe, okay, phase mark. There was an angle indicator, right?
Yes, sir.
For that, what is done is that angular position is captured by placing a reflective tape at a certain location. And this is a photosensor. So what will happen, for each rotation, this reflective tape will pass in front of this probe, it will understand. So it will use this as the zero position of the rotor to get the angular position. Then there is a vibration meter. Actually, the charge amplifier is required for these sensors. Okay. These signals, they are amplified first, then it has gone into the vibration meter. Then there is a phase meter. So this phase measurement is coming from this indicator as well as from measurement of this. Some arrangement is there, okay, by which phase is measured. And with this, this is the mechanism I was talking about, the photosensor. This is the hardware part, and with this vibration measurement, this phase meter reading, okay, they carry out some balancing, okay. Then here they need to carry out the experiment with some trial masses, okay. Some initial reading, some initial trial mass, etc., etc., okay. There is an elaborate procedure to carry out this thing, right? And from there, from those readings, what is available is that nowadays you can use a laptop also, right? And these readings you can fit into a balancing software program. Okay. This is a typical balancing software program, and there is a balancing machine calculator also. Okay. Previously, there was some calculator sort of thing where the readings, these readings, if you put into this calculator, this location of correction mass, other things, these indicators would come here. But the question is how to draw these vector diagrams from these measurements. So that part I am not going to explain here, but this is what is available in any textbook where this field balancing section is there. Actually, what I can say is that in the textbook of Ghosh and Mollik it is available, in the textbook of Sigley, and there is another co-author, Sigley. Okay. In that book also you will get this chapter. So you must read from that textbook to find out what is the exact technique, what they do here. There are something 4-run method, etc. So you see, in field balancing, some more number of runs are required. Okay? With some given unbalance, run 0, then it is run 2, run 3. They are getting some reading corresponding to each run. Ultimately, they are finding out the correction mass, the angle for that correction mass. Anyway, some problems are there. Now, this is not part of your experiment, but at least you must know how this machine carry out the balancing operation. The basic theory is always the same. Whatever you did in your undergraduate class, that vector diagrams for the force and the unbalanced couple, that one has to produce. But how to do it, that is the question. Okay, what next here? This is now. This is an indication of the class of balancing that is required. Means a balancing machine, you have seen the specification of the balancing machine.
Yes.
Its limit was 15 gram millimeter.
Yes.
Right? So then, how we'll know that this 15 gram millimeter unbalance is there? Even we balance it to its maximum level available, that much unbalance will be there.
Yes.
So you cannot make that unbalance perfectly zero. It is not possible. So that is given by this curve, and here this G, some number is there. Say they are grade of tolerance, grade of balancing. Okay. What does it indicate? So different grades, okay, they are required for different applications. Precision grinder, gyroscope, very precision, maximum precision is required here. And for crankshaft, other things, the lowest precision. So what we get from here, balance quality grade, this is what we must know first.
Yes.
From our application, what is our balance quality grade. And this is the curve, what we are having here, maximum service speed, okay. Say for G04, precision machine, okay. If our speed is, say 10,000 RPM, okay, this line.
Yes.
What is the maximum amount of center of gravity displacement? That means that eccentricity, 0.5. Okay. I think that was 0.5 also, no? In our case, in micron. This is in micron.
Yes, sir. It's 1.5. My God. My God.
It is the same thing. So that way, for different rotors, you need to see this thing also. In actual application, you have to see what is the grade of tolerance you require. If you are really using a crankshaft, there is no point in going into that precision of balancing.
Yes.
Okay, that's clear. So this is about the theory part. And then experiment we will see from the video. So this is the thing. Today we have discussed about the first two experiments. Okay. Regarding critical speed and natural frequency, we will be discussing in another day. Okay, that is for today. Let us stop.